sign the proclamation honoring the 59th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birth.
That moment happened more than 3 decades ago after years of activists calling for a day to commemorate King's contribution to the civil rights movement. We'll mark Martin Luther King Jr. Day on Monday, but many are remembering the civil rights crusader today on what would have been his 86th birthday. Hollywood is also acknowledging King's legacy in the new film, Selma.
Those that have gone before us say, no more, no more. That means protest, that means march, that means disturb the peace, that means jail, that means risk, and that is hard.
It's a film that's raised a lot of new discussions about where we stand with race relations today. And joining me to talk more about that is Peniel Joseph, director of Tufts University's Center for the Study of Race and Democracy. Peniel, welcome back to Greater Boston.
Thank you for having me.
Let me start by asking you about some of the pushback that Selma has gotten for its portrayal of LBJ. People have said that the film doesn't quite get it right, but you, in a recent pretty sharp piece that you wrote for NPR's Code Switch blog, took vigorous issue with complaints about the representation of LBJ. Why do you think those critics get it wrong?
Well, I think they get it wrong because the movie's not about LBJ. I'm a historian who respects LBJ, the Great Society, the War on Poverty. I have a criticism against him, but certainly respect him. This movie is about Martin Luther King Jr. and, most importantly, the movement that created Selma and voting rights. And it's really a movement for democracy. I think the beautiful thing about this film, it shows how ordinary Americans, including some white allies, come together with such moral passion and force to get a policy transformation that really changes us as a nation.
I just want to read briefly one of the complaints that has been made about the LBJ issue from Julian Zelizer, the historian. He said this to Huffington Post. I think in some ways they went overboard in downplaying how committed the top official, meaning the president of the U.S., was to this. King and Johnson had a partnership by this time, not an adversarial relationship. But you take issue with the whole notion that we should be focusing on the great man or great men helping make history, right?
Absolutely. I think Ava DuVernay, who's a black woman, and this is no small feat. I think this is the best film ever made about the civil rights movement, and it's been made by a black woman, and it's a magnificent artistic achievement. But she has black women and ordinary black men at the center of this. So you have Diane Nash, you've got Amelia Boynton, you've got Coretta Scott King. These are not stick figures. These are black women who are leaders, they're thought leaders, they're intelligent, and she shows how they were part of the strategy and tactics that made this movement so successful.
Let's talk about the director for a little bit, because Oscar nominations came out today, and Selma was not shut out entirely. It was nominated for Best Picture and Best Original Song, but a lot of people thought there'd be way more nominations than that. So there's this hashtag trending on Twitter right now, Oscars So White. And there was a piece written for Grantland in which it was suggested that racism might be involved in this exclusion. Here's what Mark Harris had to say: when a predominantly white voting body seems to turn its back on a movie, one made by a woman of color about black people, it's not unreasonable to ask questions about whether a particular kind of soft racism is in play. You think he's onto something?
Yeah, I think he's onto something. The way in which I would articulate it is this: the Academy is more comfortable with films about the civil rights era or race that have white protagonists. Great example is The Help from 3 years ago. The Help is, as a historian, an egregious film because it's about this white woman who's going to galvanize domestic workers in the South.
She'll show them how it's done, right?
Yeah, so it's a white liberal fantasy, right? $216 million worldwide box office, 4 Academy Award nominations, and 1 Best Supporting Actress nomination as well. That's an important film in the sense that it amplifies what white voters of the Academy feel African-American history should be. Selma is different. This is an unapologetically African-American film. It's actually sympathetic to white martyrs. James Reeb, Viola Liuzzo, who's in there.
But the white protagonists aren't at the center of the story.
They're not at the center. Lee C. White is one of Johnson's advisors. He's portrayed very sympathetically in the film, and so is John Doerr, the late Justice Department official, Assistant Attorney General. But it's not about white people. It's about black folks trying to transform American democracy, and many Academy voters don't feel comfortable with that.
The film's also been praised for a fuller portrayal of Martin Luther King than sometimes we're used to seeing in popular culture. This is a long-standing complaint that MLK has been sanitized for popular consumption. Do you think that's a legit criticism?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the film is extraordinary. The actor David Oluwoyo, who portrays King is hugely magnificent. I'm surprised that he didn't get a nomination, as well as Ava not getting a nomination. And the relationship between King and Coretta Scott is really portrayed in a very three-dimensional way, including King's infidelity. So when we think about this portrayal, it's a warts and all portrayal. It's an unglamorous portrayal of the civil rights movement. And I think that Hollywood is more used to both a glamorized portrayal of the civil rights movement, including films that I like 42 about Jackie Robinson, and it's used to having a white anchor who white folks can identify with. And I think that's sad, because we're human beings. We should be able to identify with whoever's on film. I watch plenty of films that have absolutely no black characters in them.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this my whole life. I love film, and I can identify whether the character's gay, straight. It's all about identifying with this other human being on screen.
I got to ask you briefly, what was your take on the protests that shut down Boston area highways today in the name of the Black Lives Matter movement? What was your reaction?
Well, I think it's very important. 50 years after Selma, 50 years after voting rights in the Great Society, we actually have a continuation of that civil rights movement by millennials, by young people who are doing creative disruption. They're morally impassioned, and they're policy specific for both criminal justice reforms, but also a new vision of social justice. And they're saying even in this winter of 2015, they're not going to stop. So I think it's incredibly important. I think it's a sign of the times, and it's very important that it's happening on the 85th birthday of Martin Luther King Jr.
All right, Peniel Joseph, thank you. Appreciate it.